So we're learning Tanya. We're on page tests. We're going to finish today chapter 4. Baruch Hashem, we're moving along nicely. So the Alter Rebbe introduced in chapter 4 an amazing thought, a revolutionary thought, and that is that Torah mitzvahs, kiyum, the fulfillment of mitzvahs and the study of Torah, which the Alter Rebbe calls through the levushim, through the garments, i.e. through thought, your speech, your action, is greater than the soul, the inspiration of the soul. And that's a very revolutionary thought, because the neshama, the soul, you would think, is where it's at. Says the Alter Rebbe, no. If you have a neshama, and your soul is bereft of thought, speech, and action of Torah mitzvahs, it's your soul, so it's your mood, and it's your trip. It's not God's trip and God's Kedusha. How do you get God's Kedusha? Through using your thought and speech and action for Hashem. One more point that I didn't mention last time, and it's worthwhile mentioning. The Alter Rebbe said towards the end of page 16 that this idea also inspires the nefesh. In other words, like this. One of the fundamental teachings of the Balcantov, Velvel, is that when a Yid serves Hashem, it should be with Ava and Yira. Now, when I say Balcantov, it's in the Torah. You have to say Hashem Elokecha, right? But the Balcantov, in his ideology of Hasidism, he says it's not enough to be a robot, a mechanical instrument in doing a mitzvah, but that your mitzvah should be inspired with a love and awe for Hashem. And when you do the mitzvah, you could tell in the mitzvah, this is someone who loves God, who fears God. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to shuckle and you have to cry and you have to dance. Those are all semantics. But one thing's for sure, that when you come to Shul in the morning, and you were in Shul yesterday, and you're going to be in Shul tomorrow, each day, when you come to Shul, and you put on your talis and your tefillin, when someone looks at you, and when you look at yourself, you say, I'm inspired. I'm inspired. But I did it yesterday. What are you inspired with? To say the same words? And I ask myself this question almost daily when I sit down to daven for that 20 minutes to half an hour, facing the wall in Shem Shabbos Shul, and I say, what am I davening with today? Am I inspired? And you have to ask yourself that question, right? Is it better not to daven? Of course not. Daven, put on tefillin. But the Baal Shem Tov says, Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem is an intrinsic part of the Torah and mitzvahs experience. So, one second. So, if that's the case, it seems to contradict what the Alter Rebbe is saying here in chapter 4. Because in chapter 4 in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe speaks about the importance and emphasis of Torah mitzvahs vis-a-vis machshava dibur u'maisa, bereft of Ava and Yira. That's the implication. As long as I think Torah and I speak Torah and I do mitzvahs, the levushim, the garments, the tools and instruments to implement Torah mitzvahs, I'm on the right track. You mean even without Ava and Yira? That's the implication. So the Alter Rebbe alluded to this, and he said, towards the last 3, 4, 5 lines of page 16, no. What happens is that when you plug into the levushim, to the garments of thought, speech, and action of Torah mitzvahs, they inspire and turn on your Ava and Yira. Not that they exclude Ava and Yira, they make your Ava and Yira not your own trip of love and fear, which can be confused and chaotic and famished and a self-ego trip. It becomes a holy Ava and a holy Yira. And the lesson that we walk away with from this brilliant thought is that if my shuckling and if my crying and if my laughing, if my Ava and Yira for Hashem is self-oriented for my nefesh, independent of the garments, it isn't necessarily holy. But if it comes and should come as a result of my garments, then it's holy love and holy fear. And that's the barometer. That's the Even HaBoichin. That's how you know, right? I'm sure you've wondered, how do I know that this Rebbe that I'm following, or this Rav that I'm looking at, or this Chassid that I respect, how do I know that they mean it? Maybe they're faking it. Right? Avi, please put on your mute. Right? How do I know that they're genuine? You know, there are people that are so brilliant and gifted that they could fake it, and they could talk the talk, walk the walk, and no one will know. And really, they're putting on a show and misleading people. That's also part of what I'm studying right now. Very smart people could do that, right? So how do you know? The Alter Rebbe here in Tanya says, without saying this, I'm paraphrasing, the Alter Rebbe says, I'll tell you how you could know. If their Aven Yira is miyusad, based on the garments of Torah mitzvahs, then it's Kedusha. And if it's their own trip, it isn't necessarily Kedusha, it's not necessarily genuine, and be very careful. Moshe, I gotta give Yoedi first a chance. So that, Moshe, give me 2 minutes. So therefore, when you learn this section here in Tanya, it's not just, shtickle Tanya. He's giving you here guidance for living life. For living life. So, in other words, when you see someone who you consider to be holy and authentic and all that, and there's a breakdown in their Torah mitzvahs on any level, don't be fooled by their inspiration. By the way, it doesn't mean to say that their inspiration isn't good for a show and not good for the masses. We have plenty of speakers that are great speakers, great entertainers, but that's what they are, entertainers. And it's good to have kosher entertainment. There's nothing wrong with it. Really. Right? I don't want what I'm going to say now. I don't want anyone to get offended, especially Yoni, who's one of the Gaboyim in the Carlebach Shul. I'm not a Shleima fan, but I wanted Friday night when I was in Ramat Bet Shemesh at a certain point, the davening at the other shuls was very, it was just terrible. It was uninspirational. Even in a Chabad shul, if there was much more singing, okay, you could kind of score some points, but it wasn't happening. So I went over to the Carlebach shul, and it was the first time. By the way, it was the first time in my life that I ever went into a Carlebach shul for a tefillah. Not that I just I'm not exposed to that here in Borough Park. Maybe now they have a Carlebach minyan, but and now they started to sing Carlebach songs even in Boviv and in other shuls without saying this is for Shleima Carlebach, because they would never say that, of course. But that's what's happening, right? But I went in, and I'll tell you, I was mamish inspired. I would cry sometimes. From the Ava, from seeing boys with kumkums, with the ponytails, and then a Sephardi guy there who was a Baki in Tanakh, who I love to hear a shir in the Sephardic shul next to Rabbi Pharaoh's shul. I mean, I could sit by that guy all day and listen to him. A Baki in Tanakh, and Tanakh is not something that we mastered, us Ashkenazim in America. It's something in Israeli yeshivas, not in the Panyevich Litvak yeshivas, in the Hesder yeshivas, and the Bnei Akiva yeshivas. They really know Tanakh well. And this man was teaching just basic Tanakh, but he knew the inside, I see him in the Carlebach Shul. I go over to him and say, what are you doing here? So he says, he's like, he doesn't want to say it too loud. He says, you see, my son, I want my son to feel good about Yiddishkeit. That's what he told me. He wanted his son to, I guess, who was having issues, to see that Yiddishkeit is real and enjoyable. So, does that mean to say Chaim Dalfin, who's a chassid of the Rebbe and a teacher of Chassidus, by going to Carlebach Shul Friday night to daven Kabbalah Shabbos and be there, became a Carlebachnik? No, he didn't. But there's something positive. So what I'm saying is that the fact that we enjoy kosher entertainment, I'm not saying that in a bad way, kosher inspiration, doesn't yet mean that's the highest form in everything. And by Chassidim too, with the Rebbes. You go to a Chassidish Tish, right? You go to a Chassidish Tish. It can be very inspirational. The benches, the pyramids, the Rebbe, the Nigunim, the Shirayim, the throwing of apples, the holding on to the shoulders and swaying. It's great. I used to bring people to the Toldasar and Shul, non-religious people, Friday nights when I was doing some work in Yerushalayim, to see what is a Chassidish Tish. And they walked out blown away. I don't have to tell you. And the same as to the Rebbe's Farbrengen in a different way. It wasn't, that style. The Lubavitch Chabad is more with the Rebbe's talking. Then there's the L'chaim and the Gunim, but whatever. It doesn't yet mean that you by going there, I've become a Lubavitcher, I've become a Toldasar, and I've become a Ponevicher. No. In a way, you're going there for entertainment. You're going there for inspiration. Let's use a more refined word, and that's great. But for it to become part of you, that's a whole other experience. So the Alter Rebbe is alluding to this also here. Your Ava and Yira, your love for God and fear for God, your tears and your laughter, what's driving it? Is it God that's driving it, or is it your own trip? You don't like the davening at this and this shul, so you go into a Carlebach shul to get turned on and inspired. You understand? That's the question that we have to analyze ourselves in Avodas Hashem, to ourselves, when we're under the talus and we're saying Krish B'Shel Amita. We have to ask ourselves, and this is Avodah, and this is how you become a more authentic, genuine Oved Hashem in whatever you are. Okay, I finished my drasha. Yoini, you wanted to say something?
I'm going to say the second thing first. I was actually had one thing, but then when you brought up this story about what happened with you at the Carlebach Shul, so right after, we were the only shul in the neighborhood that was like a non-Haredi shul that was open throughout COVID. The difference is that we opened up the minyan in the park. We had a minyan in the park. All different kinds of people came from all over, all different kinds of people that never went to a minyan for 3 years, for 2 years, they went to the park minyan. And one time everyone went to the minyan, there was a kiddush, everybody got sick, everybody got COVID, and that was it. That was finished.
Okay.
What happened was that after COVID, the first or the second week after we opened up, I started to see a bunch of guys, friends of mine, that started coming to our shul Friday nights from Avat Zion. Avat Zion is like the Bnei Akiva shul, the big one in front of us. It's like facing the shul.
Right.
And so I'm friendly with them, and I asked him, I said, what happened? All of a sudden, he said, you don't know what kind of issues and problems now we have with our kids because of COVID and isolation, blah, blah, blah. And we want to come here. I didn't ask them the first week. I asked them after a few weeks that they were coming consecutively. And they said to me, you don't know what this does for my kids. It's like the first time in 3 years, 2 years, they can let loose. They can be part of something that is, the simcha. For 2 years, they were closed. They were the most kosher ever. They were closed during every single stage of COVID. And to bring them to, and they've been coming, it's almost, a year and a half later, and they come every week. And these guys and stuff, you would never think that, they're part of a Carlebach because they're more like very straight,
Right.
like you, salvation stuff.
Right.
So that's one of the kudas. That was one of the kudas. Second kuda is when you were saying that the Balcantov and the Tanya was focusing on the inspiration side, that when you go to davening, like you said, you go today, you went yesterday, you're going tomorrow, you have that same motivation. So what was the Vilna going, what was his ashkafa going to show me? It wasn't motivation. I'm trying to understand here, like, because he was a huge tzaddik in Vilna going, and all these other tzaddikim were big tzaddikim. So, like, how do we reconcile that? Like,
Okay, good question, and here is a thought. The Vilna Goyen himself and the tzaddikim themselves, they were inspired. They were tzaddikim. The question is if the average man on the street was inspired. And it's more difficult to get inspired when you when all you know about one ox goring another ox, or how much you have to pay, 50% or 100%, versus thinking about God, spirituality, Jews, non-Jews, where am I? That's refreshing. That's exciting. Okay? So Yoni, what I'm saying is, I have no questions and issues with the Vilna Goyen and who wrote so many Sifrei Kabbalah or other, great literature, Gedolim, and what I'm saying. Because if you take a look on the internet of a picture, I've mentioned it, but you must have forgotten, of Rabbi Shmuel Birnbaum of Mir. He was a Rashiva here in Mir in New York. He came from Shanghai with another Rav, I forget now, another Litvak. They're sitting at a wedding, and they're arguing about a pshat in the Gemara and Tosfos. I don't know. It's like they want to eat each other up. I mean, and again, could it be a show? I don't think so. In other words, they didn't even know. They went into the world of learning. They forgot they were a wedding. They're supposed to be quiet. They're supposed to be civil. And they're just ripping up each other apart in the Litvish way of understanding a sugya, okay? I don't have a problem. But the average person, and as Moshe and I remember, one of the main things we spoke about a lot when I was there is people are getting stale. Moshe said he sees in his shul all kinds of Bali Tshuva and others that they've been involved for years and they're stale. It's stale. It's like that's what we're talking about. So the Baal Shem Tov, the derech of the Baal Shem Tov lends itself to deal with this issue more than just learning a piece of Gemara. Now, if the study of Musar would be on par in the real way, in the same way as the study of Chassidus in Litvish yeshivas, it would make a difference. And for that matter, and I don't want to go into so much to talk about, but if the study of Chassidus would be in other Chassidish yeshivas, like the way it is in Chabad, it would also make a big difference, and it isn't. And that's why the Rebbe, when he spoke to the Toldos Aaron Rebbe, and to the Gerer Rebbe, and to the Belzer Rebbe, and to any Rebbe that came to him, his number one thing was with these Chassidish Rebbes, institute a serious learning of Chassidus that's required, not a 20-minute, you could do what you want in between the Seder, totally not organized, and it was a joke, Sheba jokes. And this you can ask the chevra that went to yeshiva in the 60s and 70s and 80s, because I've asked them. No seriousness given in Chassidish yeshivas to the learning of Chassidus. Not talking about Tanya. Noim Eli Melech, Mor V'Shamesh, Soit Sheresh V'Avoida, you name it. Svas Emes. I just was talking to a getter from Ashdod who was in Shul Shabbos by us here. He knows the whole lowdown. The whole lowdown he gave me. He says, you ready to hear? This will be a half of a book for you. I have to give you more time. We spent an hour. And he gave me the whole lowdown on Ger. So, a half of the lowdown on Ger, which blew my mind. And I'm not going to talk about it now. I don't know if I ever will talk about it, because it's big, big issues. Anyway, So,
Simply on the question of why of learning Hasidus?
no, not a learning. He was talking about the split. Why there's a split in Ger?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. But I asked him, Hillel, because he says I'm a Lubavitcher, and he's wearing the garish spodik with the socks, you know, the way they wear the black socks and their shoes, their pants tucked into the socks. So I asked him, why'd you become a Lubavitcher? He's a Lubavitcher, a fiery Lubavitcher. Grew up in Borough Park as a getter as ger could be. So he said, because there's no learning of Chassidus in ger. It's a joke. He says, and he even told me that their leaders don't know Chassidus. Their leaders don't know Chassidus today. That's what he told me. Because they don't learn Chassidus. So it's, you know, if you don't learn, just like if you don't, if I don't know Choshen Mishpat, because I never learned Choshen Mishpat, I can't make a ruling on money matters. I didn't train in that area. I didn't train in the laws of divorce and how to and give a get and all that. You have to be trained. The Rebbe always said, you go to a Velvel as a doctor for the issues that Velvel deals. You go to Isser for the issues that he deals with. Imagine you go to Isser for Velvel's issues, you go to Velvel for Isser's issues. Sorry, they know general medicine and they give you some general advice, but when it's crucial and life-saving and life issues, you got to go to the person who knows. Yes, Moshe, now it's your turn.
Yeah, Rabbi Dov, you were talking earlier about Yira, Avas Yira, and understanding by seeing if someone's real. And you mentioned the Vushim, and I got lost there, and I wanted to know maybe like an example, some examples. Now, just to be able to understand
the example is of the Chassid who comes to the Gerer Rebbe, the Beis Yisrael, who lived in Geula, the holy Gerer Rebbe, and he knew him from before the war. He was beardless. Now he had a beard, and he put on a big spudik, and it's the middle, and he gives him shulim. You know, after Friday night, after Kabbalah Shabbos, you go over and you give shulim to the Rebbe. You know, I mean, you do it to a Rav too many times, and as he passes by, the Rebbe says, instead of saying Good Shabbos, a freilichen Purim, a happy Purim. In other words, who are you kidding? He felt that he wasn't ready for Zoshtreimel. Like, that's what he felt. You know, I guess he knew him, and he felt like, who are you kidding? That's an example. You ask for an example? You know, it's a fine line. I'll tell you, when I was in Marin County, I had a group of chevre. Some were Bali Tshuva, and some were wanting Bali Tshuva, but they still were driving to Shul. And they wore a gartel. And it blew my, again, I was young, coming from 770, and learning, being a student of Rabbi Yoel, it's very serious and all that. And you put on a gartel when you're keeping Shabbos. You don't put on a gartel if you're not keeping Shabbos. And he was wearing a gartel. So, I couldn't handle it. And so I spoke to one of the other ones who were wearing the gartel, but they were already Bali Tshuva keeping Shabbos. And I said, and they were good friends. I said, could you explain to me what's going on? So they said it's a fraternity. In college we have fraternities. We're the guys, we're the boys. We hang out together. We do things together. You have to understand, from where I was coming from, I couldn't relate to this. I never understood. Now I understand it. But then, it's like foreign. What do you mean? Pneumius. Either you're there or you're not there. What are you? Make up your mind. And they explained that this gives them a good feeling. And putting on a gartel, even though they're still driving a Shabbos, is a good thing. And it makes, and I saw it. And they were right. because then he became a Baal Teshuvah, and etc. So it's a fine line, Moshe. It's a fine line. It's a fine line. But the bottom line is that the Aven Yira, if you want to know if it's genuine, it must be predicated on the levushim of machshava, dibur, ma'is, and Torah mitzvahs. That was the point. Chevra, we had a good shir and farbrengen, and we'll continue tomorrow in Mitzvah Shem. Seid gesund, Psudas Tevis. Have a great day.